Every 40 seconds, a person commits suicide. Grim statistics on the state of suicide globally from the World Health Organization. Worse still, suicide is the second leading cause of death among youth with age between 15 and 29 around the world. So what's pushing the youth to the edge? What are some of the contributing factors? This week, World Suicide Prevention Day was observed in an effort to raise awareness on this menace. Tonight, we discuss suicide, the scourge among the youth, and what we can do to tackle it effectively. My guests are here, and let me begin with Enid. You actually, I know your story so well. I've hosted you in various forums. You were diagnosed in 2013 with bipolar disorder. And what was that actually brought on by?
It was brought on by trauma from my past. I was assaulted. I was sexually assaulted, and for very many years I didn't know how to cope with it, so I buried it under very many layers of self-loathing and guilt. So I believe after a while of trying to suppress this assault and not really getting to know what it was about and processing it, I eventually snapped. First, I was actually diagnosed with depression. Then later on, I had a very intense manic episode, and that's when it was re-diagnosed as bipolar disorder.
And you were eventually put on treatment, but did you go through any bouts of maybe suicide attempts?
Yes, I did actually. Last year, towards the beginning of the year, I never really call it a suicide attempt. I have never actually called it that, because for me, I was in a lot of pain. And for me, it wasn't about killing myself. It was about wanting that pain to stop, wanting to have control of whatever I was going through that particular time. And it was triggered by a very difficult relationship that I felt was disintegrating. And for me, I felt I still have to go back to that situation. And for me, at that point, I felt I can't continue living like this. This pain is too much, and I just wanted the pain to stop. So I took a bunch of pills. I tried cutting myself, but luckily I was able to get help. My family were there, and they took me to hospital, and I was able to be saved. And later on, I was in rehabilitation for about 4 to 5 months, because it's important to have a very strong follow-up after such an attempt,
right? Because
one attempt can lead to another and another, and eventually maybe I could have died by suicide. But it was very important that I had that help after the attempt.
And before I get to, you talked about going to rehab, there's a lot of inner work, self-work that you have to do also on your own beyond, the other help you get. But let me come to Betty Cynthia. You attempted suicide 6 times.
Yes.
Just take us through your experience.
It was a very hard experience. Knowing that I had not known what depression is. I had not had that awakening of depression is actually an illness in itself. So my story is like hers. I had accumulated so much things. I had not dealt with so many things from my past, and I used to stock them up, and I think they did outburst on me, because I had not, when my aunt died, I wanted to move on. I never gave myself that chance to process things. And eventually that's when I tried my first attempt, and it didn't work. I went through my second attempt. It also didn't work. I took pills in my first, pills in my second, and I really got frustrated at one point that I want all this pain to go away. I want all this voidness that I feel to actually come to an end, but then death is not working. So I went for my third attempt. That's when I was diagnosed with bipolar mental disorder. I was put under antidepressants, and I also visited the therapist quite a number of times, and I used the same antidepressants for my 4th attempt. And then to my 5th and to my 6th, I started cutting myself because I felt like my voice was not being heard enough. So it was quite hard for me, and also hard for my family, since we were so new to this. We were so new to suicide. We were so new to bipolar. We had never heard of it. We only heard of it in the movies. And then here is me, a 17-year-old, being told I have a mental disorder. We had questions like, where has it come from? What causes it? We had the myths and misconceptions around it. Are we supposed to believe it? So it was quite hard.
It's interesting, the common thread between you and Enid's story is you wanted to end the pain. You just wanted it to all finish. But it's been said before that before you actually think about committing suicide and taking your life physically, you've actually committed suicide in different ways. in your life. How would you describe that? If it's maybe with your job or relationships, family, did you see different parts of your life kind of breaking down and dying off?
For me, I think I saw my whole life being so done with, over and done with. And I think I thought that I was doing the world a favor by just getting out of this world. I thought that people were better off without me. So I think various parts of my life were broken. My spiritual life, I felt that even I was getting weak, I was not getting out of bed, so that means my physical life was also done with. My mental, because I was thinking thoughts like I don't want to live. I was thinking so many things at a time, so my mental life was also done with. My emotional part, I was feeling so sad. I didn't want to see anyone. I was canceling plans with everyone. Tomorrow we meet we agree we're meeting for coffee. I don't want to see you. So many parts of my life were over and done with, and I really felt that. And that is why I think I got to that point of thinking that the world will be better off without me. Yeah.
Let me bring in Major. You know, you're listening to at least the two accounts of Enid and Betty, and you deal a lot with people who have attempted suicide. But what are some of the telltale signs when it comes to maybe, loved ones trying to figure out what could be going on?
Thanks, Victoria. And thank you to the two ladies for your sharing, your openness and your bluntness. Truly, I truly honor your stories, because, you've talked about things that people just can't get through their throat and share with other people, which is that it's really about relief. It's really about being in such a dark and scary space that you being out of this world seems like a rational decision. And I hope that just by listening to you, people will understand that that feeling should not be met with a moral judgment. So coming back to the issue about signs and symptoms, I think they've articulated it so well. And the idea of having many deaths before the physical death, you're very right. Because the idea of wanting to no longer be there means that there is no connection to like the higher purpose that brought you here. So your spiritual life, and please note, I don't mean religion, I mean spiritual life is dead. It means that there is nobody you feel who, if you're a woman, will tell you you are phenomenal. If you're a man, there's nobody who will tell you you are, that they are so proud of you. So there's that idea that I have no personal worth. And sometimes that lack of personal worth, that lack of a spiritual grounding, that lack of hope and possibilities, what we see it look like is actually silence, withdrawal, isolation, drug and alcohol abuse, drunk driving. Of course, we have cutting. I won't say where, somebody may try it, but yeah, we have, that cutting. We also have reckless behavior, which is also of a sexual nature. I don't care what happens to me. I just want to be able, I don't matter. So anything can happen to me. But what is the most interesting thing is that with all those things, there is also that desire and seeking to reawaken a feeling that will once again connect somebody. Because when somebody comes up and says, something is wrong with you, tell me what is wrong, you find everything changes for certain people. But you also realize it depends on who asks that question.
Right.
Because if, for example, you come from a circle that is untrustworthy or is to blame or is somehow responsible for that, you realize asking that question won't go far.
Right. And let me bring in Ndungu really quickly. Major apologies for cutting you off.
No
but
worries.
this is also an issue that in men, suicide cases are 3 times higher than in women, at least for Kenya. Ndungu, in your situation, how did you kind of navigate through some of those suicidal thoughts?
I consider myself lucky because one of the things that I usually do is read a lot. So I was able to find an online community who made me feel that this is something normal that people go through, that this is something that you cannot overcome, that you just need to put in some work into it. One of the ways that I was affected was one of the ways my negative thoughts manifested themselves was I ate a lot. I grew so big, even I didn't care about how I ate. I didn't cater for my diet. So when I was dealing with it, that was the first thing that I did. I was lucky enough, I was able to see a psychiatrist, and I actually didn't tell them what I had done or what I had gone through, but they were able to tell, and immediately they got into that mode whereby we need to see this person. In my case, I actually refused to go for in-house treatment, but now I was able to be seeing the doctor for maybe 2-3 times a week, which really helped a lot. And also having support groups, having people who are going through similar things, because at that time maybe I wasn't in a place whereby I could talk to my friends about these things. I couldn't talk to my family, but being able to read and listen to other people's experiences really made me feel at peace with what I was going through.
Why weren't you able to talk to friends and family?
One of the things that I really struggled with was self-stigma. I really felt that this was not something that I was supposed to be going through. I thought this was something that was going to make me weak. It made me feel really inadequate, and I think that was one of the major things that I felt inadequate. I felt as an inadequate son, an inadequate brother, an inadequate friend. I felt I had no purpose, as Major said. I felt like my work here was done, and but I think reading a lot really helped. But so even when you think about the self-stigma, I was wondering, if I see myself this way, how little will these people think of me? And mind you, these are the same people that I feel inadequate. I'm being inadequate to them, I'm serving no purpose. So I couldn't belittle. I thought if I told them of what I was going through, I'll be belittling myself.
And Pinky, let me bring you in, because Ndu mentioned something really important: stigma.
Yes.
Which prevents conversations like this from happening.
Right.
You've actually made an effort to break down those barriers and have people, bring out a lot of their struggles in a safe space. What has that kind of brought out?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say the hashtag for this year's Suicide Prevention Day was raise awareness, not stigma. And the way that we're going to do that is by making this conversation completely normal.
Right.
It's not something that somebody should feel afraid to talk about. I've tried to sort of bring it up in every platform that I have to talk about mental health and why it's important that we take it seriously. Our youth today need to be empowered. They need to be able to believe in themselves enough to know that tomorrow needs them. And tomorrow does need them. How can we, even as parents, even as teachers, as people who influence the future, how can we allow our youth to feel that they are completely worthless? And so it's really up to us to change the narrative. It's up to us to make sure that we continue this conversation. Mental Health Awareness Month was in May, but that doesn't mean that the conversation stops when May ends. The conversation continues. You need to talk about it in your workplace. You need to talk about it on media, social media. You need to talk about it when you're out for coffee with your friends. How are you feeling? How are you doing? How's it going? Are you okay? And that's the thing. How often are we checking in with each other? How often, and are we making it comfortable to say, look, I'm not feeling okay.
I wonder, and you mentioned something, you need to tell the youth that tomorrow needs them. Why do you think that message hasn't necessarily been getting through to them?
Again, I think it's what we're churning out. What are we? I'm very in the belief of what we listen to, what we speak, what our thoughts are, what we're, our diet, not only of food, what are we consuming consistently? That is what our future will look like. So who are we hanging around with? What are we reading? What are we listening to music-wise on the radio? So it's really, each of us are responsible for what the youth are being impacted by.
Right. And Philip, let me bring you in because a space where a lot of the youth play in is social media. You're very active there as the digital humanitarian. You were diagnosed with PTSD after serving as a first responder for the Red Cross. You've been at pretty much every disaster that this country has seen in recent memory. What impact did that have on you?
Being digital humanitarian is actually a calling because we receive a lot of caseloads online from rape, people who need blood, a lot of health issues. But as a disaster responder, I volunteer a lot for the Red Cross and other emergency agencies. And I didn't know the impact it had until probably after DUSIT. DUSIT actually brought everything I've actually done over the 5-6 years. Because see, as a responder or as a humanitarian, you get front row access to all these disasters. You deal with the emotional baggage from families, from bereaved families. You carry that pain, you carry that emotions. And for me, DUSIT was it brought out all these deaths. When waking up, you see those bodies. At times, even for me, when I go to hospitals, when I go to see friends in wards, that smell of the ward alone brings back the memories of the responses I've gone to. At times, when I hear a boom sound, I hear a gunshot, it brings those emotions. At times, when my son at home calls me daddy, I hear those kids who are at Westgate. So it's, as a responder, we grapple with so much things, and being a man, it's very hard to actually talk about it because people judge you. They're like, you uko gonja ya wazungu. People tell you that it's you need to man up. And it really affected me, especially in my house, with my family, even my friends, my work, until I actually accepted that I'm actually sick. Because PTSD is something which makes you tend to avoid people, and you have these panic attacks. You have these anxiety attacks where you feel like you're choking, you can't breathe. But now I've actually got treatment, and I'm good. I seek therapy, and the best treatment I've actually found out is peer-to-peer counseling, where narrative therapy actually helps, where I speak about what I do. And as digital humanitarian, we rolled out digital literacy in schools, where we give support to students, to universities. And just to echo what Pinky is saying, I think as a society we failed the youth, because the youth have no venting box. As parents, we are not even there for the youth. So as digital humanitarian, we receive at least 4 suicidal attempts on Twitter every day.
Wow.
When you interrogate the youth, they tell you that, my parents are never there for me. As you find, our youths are actually grappling to identify, to rediscover themselves. So I think it's time parents also now create time for the youth, even as a society. If you notice right now, the youth have their own language, have their own music. And as the older generation, we are not listening to them. So it's time we sit down and create spaces where, because I feel the mental issues as a country, and it's sad social media is the biggest enabler.
And speaking of which, because you also took a step back from social media at a point, because it also serves as a trigger, like you said. What would you say the role it plays now, especially in our society, and how should people interact with it now?
Victoria, first, as a country, it's really sad that Kenya is known as a bully central. We thrive on bullying and character assassinating others. People think it's the in thing that to troll and abuse. But do we know the impact it does to someone being bullied? Like the cases we get of young teenagers. These teenagers, social media is their currency. Any like, any comment, that's what they thrive on. So I feel like as a country, like for me, social media, what triggers my PTSD attacks, people posting graphic photos, like the photos of the late Cohen were doing viral. I'm like, why do people do that? Would you post a photo of your mom or your sister or your children? So I think it's as a country, we need to have just a bit of self-etiquette where we know what to post online. Social media is toxic. Like for me, I have learned to balance. I rarely go online, and even at home I have learned to have tech-free zones where we don't even use the phones on the dining and even the bedroom. I think it's time we actually create spaces where we can physically interact and not to be online.
And Major, just hearing Philip, the reason why also the stigma is so heightened when it comes to suicide is the fact that for many years suicide has been treated as a crime here in Kenya. How do we begin to reverse that from a legislative perspective?
I mean, it's just the conversation that we were having, and it's a conversation we've been having since the beginning of the year. And even when we went for the public participation for the amendment of the Mental Health Act, and right now it has moved from Senate and gone to the House. But, you know, like I was discussing with him this evening, it cannot address the decriminalization of suicide because self-harm is enshrined in the penal code. So it has to first be like revised from the penal code, and that will change. But even as that happens, we need to come to an awareness and an understanding that that is a law that does not speak to what is happening right now and what will actually move the needle for us. Moving the needle meaning preventing suicide, saving lives, and stopping this hemorrhaging and pile up of bodies is to be practical. When somebody is considering to take their own lives, they do it not because they are, you know, out to gain anything really or to punish anybody. It is really an irrational decision, but there's a build-up to it. So if we can be able to bring interventions and interruptions, we can be able to address this. And it's not just about our homes, it's also our politics. It's also how we've decided to run this country, where majority is the youth, but really to be able to have a sense of esteem of providing for oneself is not possible. You have the majority of people who are living day by day on survival mode. At some point, people get tired of surviving, you know, and that's why we have all these vices that are presenting themselves that all seem to be culminating in people feeling this world is not my home.
Yeah.
And it really should concern us all.
Enid, let me hear from you in terms of some of the coping mechanisms, because you mentioned after the attempt last year, you went to rehab for a couple of months, and, you know, someone could be hearing that and thinking, okay, I went to rehab as well. Didn't do much. You know, what other things could they do now from a personal perspective?
One of the things I learned to do as a coping mechanism is practice mindfulness in how I treat myself. I really had to learn to build my self-esteem again and to realize that I'm a beautiful person, I'm worthy of love, respect, and dignity. And when I got to realize that, then I was able to now start asking for help. I started going for therapy. I started attending classes where I would meet friends, and I had a support group of fellow friends of mine who are still struggling with mental health issues, and we were able to share to each other that this is what I do. For example, I don't take coffee, I don't take tea because it triggers anxiety, and when I get anxiety, then I start feeling this pain and constriction in my chest. So learning to talk to friends, diet, exercising, that's one of the coping mechanisms. I also prefer watching comedies, for example, because it makes life not too serious. I'm able to laugh at myself and about many other things that could be stressing me. So those are some of the coping mechanisms that I found really helpful.
And speaking of measures, Betty, do you feel that enough safe spaces exist, or that they exist at all, outside of maybe going to a hospital or, you know, other institutions that, you know, give that service?
I believe that, yes, they are there, but I believe that we can do better. We can do better from a point of when the government comes in, most probably, and brings mental health to high schools and primary schools, because we can't give depression an age gap that it starts from 20 to 25, or you're depressed only when you get married, or when you get kids, that's when you get staff enough to make you depressed. Depression can start in as early as 13 years. So when we get mental health in schools, for example, primary schools and in high schools, and we teach these kids about stress management, we teach them about minding their mind, we teach them about how much you have an investment in your mind, and your mind is an investment in itself, that we will be doing the world a favor. We will be doing the youth a favor. Also having other safe spaces that are public and affordable, and people having places where people are going to come out and talk about it without feeling that society is going to judge them, or without fearing that maybe if I say I have a mental illness, I'm going to be considered as mad. So yes, they are there, but I believe we can do a better job from from various departments, from the government to even churches and in schools, we can do a better job in that.
Ndugu, I want to get this from you because I remember reading while researching for this program, someone saying that they had suicidal thoughts, attempted several times, and they said, I had to give myself a reason to live every day. So, 24 hours pass, I lived for that, whatever reason that was. The next day I have to find another reason. For you, what do you do?
That is, I think it's important I know that continues to be a battle.
Yeah.
For most people living with a mental illness, it's not that once that, it's like a chronic condition. If you go even look at the statistics, if someone has attempted suicide before, they are 3 to 4 times more likely to try again. So I think it's important to always have a reason. One of the things I encourage people to do is not to use other people as a source of. You need to find it within yourself to live for yourself, to meet your better self, to meet yourself who's stronger, to live for the experiences that you don't know that are ahead of you, and we also need to encourage people to know that they will be stronger to face the next wave that comes with it. Some of the things that I have been able to was sometimes when I was in a bad situation, I'd get maybe a friend out of nowhere just calling me, hey, we should make plans to meet up. Yeah, maybe by the time I got to such a point, maybe I'd started getting away from friends, canceling on plans. But in my mind, I'd be like, hey, it's not good for this person that I not speak to this person. Maybe there is something important that they want to tell me. Maybe like I'd get a project that will really need an input. I found a purpose for myself in this world, and this is what really helped me to cope with the day-to-day.
Brilliant. Finding the purpose within yourself, that I'm the reason why I need to keep going in this life.
Yeah.
I like that. Philip, on the treatment front, because you actually went to Madari, you signed yourself in, and many people kind of have this thought and perception of how that institution runs, but you've actually lauded it and said it was affordable, it was clean, it helped.
I think there's a lot of stigma around Madari, and most people who have these myths around Madari, they have never been there.
Yeah.
It's only hearsay. I've been there, and do you know how much therapy is?
No, how much is it?
50 shillings.
Wow.
Opening a file is 250. I know so many youths who can't afford probably to go to a private therapy institution, which is like 6,000 or 5,000. Madari is there, it's clean. It has the best psychiatrists, the therapists in town. I think once you're battling mental issues, it's about acceptance. To treat mental illness, you have to accept. And for me, being a humanitarian, you actually grapple between responding to an event. If you don't respond, again, you have that guilty trip. And how I cope up is, as a digital humanitarian, I actually give back to others, because there's some people who actually reach out to me that your story inspired me. So the more I actually go out and help others, gives me more life. Madari has the best treatment. And for me, I think the government needs to set up more institutions. It's really a shame that we only depend on Madari right now. And even the meds, they should be really zero rated. And we don't have spaces. And I want to disagree with my colleague here. There are no spaces. As a society, we don't have a space where we can actually go and actually talk freely without being judged. Right now, if you try and come out, you'll be judged. People laugh at you on social media. Yeah. And social media is quite a toxic place for mental health. I mean, person battling mental illness. If you're battling mental illness, just stay offline. Find other activities like jogging, swimming. Like for me, boxing really works. Walking around, cycling, and just getting friends who. I have a friend who comes to my place and he doesn't talk. He just sits there. That alone also, it's actually the thought that counts. And one thing which I really want to tell guys, if you know someone that's going through mental issues, the first thing you say to him really matters. Yeah. If you come judging me, I will lock you out, I'll shut you out.
Speaking of safe spaces, Pinky, because you've created one, the What Women Want Forum, and yes. You've had also discussions on mental health, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of stories. Yes. But in your opinion, from what you've heard, what's missing from the mental health conversation, at least now, from what you've seen?
I don't think anything is missing. I think we are ready to have this discussion. Like Philip said, there's probably not enough spaces to have this discussion. One thing that she said just before we went on air that I'd like to tell you about, Victoria, is that we don't say commit suicide, because commit means that somebody did something wrong. But it's death by suicide, or died by suicide, because the person who took their own lives was in a very dark space. and we should not say that they committed suicide. You know, being in that dark space is very painful. And also another thing that I found within the space that I offer and how we discuss it is that everybody, you know, whether it's you, me, everybody here has had some sort of mental health issue and has maybe thought about suicide. So, you know, we should be able to just have this conversation normally. But I always say when you're unwell, you go to the doctor. When you want your hair done, you go to the hairdresser. Yes, it's okay to go to a therapist.
And I'm glad you brought that up in terms of terminology. Something as simple as that can shift the discussion. You know, Major, let me finish off with you in terms of what do you tell someone, they're watching this program, probably thought through this several times in terms of ending their life. What do you tell them? Because at the end of the day, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem, a temporary state. How do they kind of come out of that? And of course, if they can't do it alone, but what do you tell them?
I would like to tell them that there's a lie. There's a lie you've been told, there's a lie you've told yourself, and that is that it matters who you're connected to, it matters how much money you have, it matters who loves you or who doesn't love you, it matters who your family is. All those things are lies. At the end of the day, just as you are so important in this life. And the way you came with your own purpose, you came with your own resources, you came with your own capabilities, you came with your own resilience. And so the lie is that you need all these other things for you to derive a purpose that you can spring your life from. The truth is, go into yourself. It is there. Find it, and then you will find yourself. And then you'll be able to actually move from one day to the next, and live out the purpose of you coming here.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much to all of my guests. Let's keep the conversation going. It just starts here. It begins here. But we need to replicate such safe spaces across this country. Thank you so much for coming in. And keep the conversation going on social media as well. # Citizen Weekend. Tweet me as well of some of your experiences and some solutions to this problem as well. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.
Thank you.